We're heading into the middle of the Atlantic now because we're going to look at one of the most famous shipwrecks of all time. The Titanic has been the subject of endless documentaries, countless books, and some of Hollywood's biggest movies. Yet, there is one version of the story that has never been told in full, a version that only began to surface when Robert Ballard descended into the abyss in 1985. His discovery changed history, but what he found was not the noble tragedy the world wanted to hear. Beneath 2.5 miles of icy water, the Titanic told a darker story, one written in twisted steel and shattered rivets, a story of arrogance, greed, and human failure. Today, as Ballard reaches the final chapter of his life, he has hinted at the confession that has haunted him for decades. The Titanic was not simply a victim of fate, but a disaster engineered into existence long before her maiden voyage. Robert Ballard's life was shaped by his fascination with the sea. Born in 1942, he grew up captivated by stories of exploration and the mysteries of the ocean. After joining the U.S. Navy during the Cold War, he trained in sonar and submarine navigation, gaining skills few of his peers possessed. But Ballard's ambition was not to command ships. It was to uncover the secrets of the deep, to reach places where no human eye had ever looked. In the 1970s, he pioneered the use of remotely operated vehicles, robotic cameras that could survive the crushing pressures of the deep ocean. While others doubted this method, Ballard believed machines, not men, would unlock the last great frontier. And of all the mysteries that consumed him, none burned brighter than the Titanic. The Titanic was no ordinary ship. She was marketed as unsinkable, the crown jewel of engineering and luxury, a floating palace that symbolized the triumph of man over nature. Yet, on her maiden voyage in April 1912, she struck an iceberg and disappeared into the Atlantic, taking more than 1,500 lives with her. The tragedy shocked the world, but from the beginning, the story was carefully polished. Reports of corporate negligence, ignored iceberg warnings, and questionable design flaws were smoothed over. Instead, the Titanic was remembered as a noble tragedy, a great ship struck down by chance, a story of gallantry, sacrifice, and fate. For over 70 years, the truth was buried along with the wreck, hidden beneath the waves while legend overtook fact. To Ballard, this was infuriating. He did not want myths, he wanted the truth, no matter how uncomfortable. In 1985, after years of searching and with the backing of the U.S. Navy, Ballard finally found her. The first descent was like entering another world. His robotic cameras slipped down into the silent blackness, 2.5 miles beneath the surface, until ghostly shapes began to emerge. A vast debris field stretched across the seabed, scattered coal, twisted metal, fragments of lives frozen in time. And then out of the void, Titanic's bow appeared, rising from the ocean floor like a ghost, majestic and ruined all at once. Railings bent and broken still seemed to wait for passengers who would never return. Rusticles, strange icicle-like formations of bacteria, hung from her sides. Ballard later described the silence as overwhelming. The Titanic was not just a wreck of steel and rivets, it was a cemetery. Shoes lay in pairs where people had fallen together, clothing clung to fragments of luggage, and personal belongings were scattered like whispers of interrupted lives. The ship was not simply history, it was death preserved. But among the sorrow, Ballard noticed something else. The wreck did not match the official story. Survivors had long claimed the ship went down intact, slipping beneath the waves in one graceful descent. Yet here was proof that Titanic had split violently apart, her bow and stern lying more than 1,900 feet apart, with a wide debris field between them. The breakup had been catastrophic, scattering boilers, beams, and lifeboat davits across the seabed. Hull plating had peeled back like paper, rivets had popped loose, and brittle steel had twisted under pressure. Metallurgical studies later confirmed what the wreck suggested. Titanic had been built with low-quality rivets and steel that turned brittle in freezing temperatures. She had not been sunk by an iceberg alone. Her very design had betrayed her. Titanic had been doomed long before she ever struck the ice. The lifeboats told another grim tale. There were only 20 on board, enough for half the passengers. Regulations at the time required lifeboats based on tonnage, not passenger capacity, and White Star Line executives had fought to keep the number low. More lifeboats would have cluttered the elegant decks, spoiling the ship's aesthetic. Ballard's footage showed unused davits, empty cranes that could have lowered more boats had they existed. The cruelty of that choice was undeniable. Meanwhile, wireless operators had received multiple iceberg warnings, but many were ignored or delayed. The radio room was busy transmitting passenger messages, prioritizing luxury over safety. Ballard could not see these choices in the wreck, but knowing the history made the twisted steel even more damning. This was no unavoidable act of fate. It was a catastrophe born of arrogance. And yet, when Ballard returned with the evidence, the world didn't want to hear it. The discovery itself electrified the globe, but the darker truths were set aside. Newspapers printed haunting photos of the bow, spoke of ghosts haunting the deep, and revived old tales of sacrifice and romance. The world embraced the legend, not the crime scene. Hollywood would later immortalize that legend, turning Titanic into a profitable symbol of doomed love and human courage. The reality that she was a corporate failure built with shortcuts, sailed into danger with ignored warnings, and sunk because of negligence, was less convenient. Admitting it would have reopened old lawsuits, raised questions of liability, and tarnished a profitable myth. Governments had little interest in exposing old scandals. Silence was easier. Even Ballard's own expedition carried secrets. Officially, his mission was a scientific one, a quest to find Titanic. But in truth, much of his funding and support came from the U.S. Navy, which tasked him with inspecting 2 sunken nuclear submarines. The Titanic search provided the perfect cover. That overlap between military secrecy and Titanic's rediscovery fueled conspiracy theories. Some whispered that artifacts were quietly removed from the wreck, or that images and findings were deliberately withheld. Others pointed to the long-standing insurance swap theory, which claimed Titanic had been replaced with her damaged sister ship Olympic in a failed financial scheme. Ballard never endorsed these theories, but the fact that the official story of Titanic's sinking had been wrong gave conspiracy believers fuel. If the public had been misled about how she sank, what else might have been hidden? In the years since, Ballard has spoken of Titanic as a memorial and a warning, but behind those words lies something heavier. His surveys and studies revealed the truth. Titanic was not simply the victim of an iceberg, but of human arrogance. She was built with flaws, launched with pride, sailed with overconfidence, and when disaster came, her passengers paid the price for decisions made in boardrooms far from the sea. Her story is not just about 1912. It is a mirror held up to every society that ignores warnings, cuts corners, and buries uncomfortable truths. Today, Titanic lies in darkness 2 miles below the Atlantic. Her bow tilts upward, her stern twisted apart, her decks forever empty. Shoes and suitcases remain on the seabed, grim reminders of lives lost. The ship is not only a grave, she is testimony. A silent voice reminding us that arrogance sinks ships, greed destroys lives, and history, no matter how carefully rewritten, always leaves traces waiting to be uncovered. So what do you believe? Was Titanic truly the tragic accident of ice and fate that legend has told us for more than a century? Or was Robert Ballard right to hint at something darker, a disaster written into the ship before she ever touched the water? The wreck remains silent, but in its shattered steel and scattered artifacts, the truth waits for those willing to see it.